Hello, everyone, and welcome back into another edition of Inquire Live at Game Day Central, sponsored by NJM Insurance. Tonight, we are coming to you live in just a little bit. The Eagles will host the Green Bay Packers. It is Week 12. I am Eagles beat reporter and co-host of Game Day Central, Josh Tolentino, and as always, I am joined by my fellow beat reporter and co-host, EJ Smith. EJ, how was your Thanksgiving weekend? How's it going?
My Thanksgiving weekend was great, Josh. A lot of food. You got to get back on the Peloton. Got to get a couple more. Got a couple more steps in. This the next few weeks. Get ready for Christmas. But yeah, everything's been great, man. How about you?
Everything was good on my end. Got to hang out with the NFL game in town this past week. So looking forward to this game tonight. EJ, before we get started, let's remind everyone where's the best place that they can continue the conversation.
Yeah. So Inquirer.com is Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day is where we would like to have a two-way conversation with you guys. We're going to be in there during the game, putting in our live analysis, and that can be a conversation where you guys can kind of put your comments in there too. And again, like I said, it can be kind of a back and forth. You guys can tell us how you see it, maybe something you heard on the broadcast, and on the flip side, we can tell you what we're seeing at the stadium. It's really it's one of those things that we enjoy every week. One of our favorite segments that we have every week is called What You Said. And that's where we take some of the comments that we've gotten from you guys and, we use them at the, on the latter half of the show. So definitely make sure to get over there. Again, that's Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day, where you can, hop in and chop it up with us.
All right, EJ, let's hop right into this week's show. It is a jam-packed show. The Eagles are 9-1. They've already reached the total of their victories last year under Coach Nick Sirianni during his first year. Now they're at 9 victories, on the verge of their 10th double-digit victory for this season. There are 7 games left. EJ, what has surprised you the most about this team thus far? Here we are at the end of November. They are the NFC's top seed. They possess the NFL's best record.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. If I go offense, I would say that Jalen Hurts is progress from year over year is the thing that surprised me the most. Now, obviously, the offense has kind of hit a little bit of a snag the last couple of weeks. They haven't been as productive, but even still, I mean, against the Colts, you saw that Jalen Hurts was a humongous part of what kind of led them into the fourth quarter of that game. Taking the first lead of the game late in the fourth quarter. A lot of that had to do with his legs. A couple of big time throws on some of the earlier drives. I mean, on the fourth quarter drive, but the earlier drives he made some big throws. And then on the flip side with the defense, I think just how well the secondary has played. There was obviously some questions about James Bradbury, the safety group with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps. All those guys have been playing incredibly well. I think that James Bradbury has been a big bright spot, and as has Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. That guy is leading the NFL in interceptions for a reason. He's in the right spot in the right time a lot of the times, and he's been opportunistic. So I would say it's twofold. The Eagles' turnover luck is obviously something that we may see kind of regress back to the mean, but they've been opportunistic, as a group. And again, they've definitely been playing a little bit better than I think most people expected them to going into the season.
And it's been quite the roller coaster here over the past 1.5 months. EJ, I don't know if you feel this or, the players definitely do. Speaking with Darius Slay just a few weeks ago about how strongly he feels about these night games. But this is the final stretch of a 6-week period of 4 games in prime time. So, for a majority of the part, the Eagles have risen to the occasion. Actually, their last game against the Washington Commanders a few weeks ago marked their first loss. EJ, what's your take on these night games? I know Jalen Hurts, and as he likes to say, he's ready to rise for any occasion. Other players, again, like Darius Slay, they wish all games were played at that 1 p.m. slot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that these games have a little bit of extra juice. I think that, sometimes it's actually a good test to see how these teams fare in prime time when the lights are just a little bit brighter. These night games. I think as we try and figure out how far this Eagles team can go in the postseason. How they'll fare against some of the better teams in the league. We haven't seen them play a lot of those really elite teams, but I think you can kind of glean a little bit out of how do they perform on that Monday night game against the Vikings. The Commanders game. All these primetime games, they all kind of offer a little bit of an indication of what we can expect from the Eagles when they do play some of the bigger teams. And there's a lot of stakes going into the game because obviously, yeah, a lot of these guys like playing at 1 p.m. Like to be in that rhythm. The Eagles have kind of been out of a rhythm. I can tell you because we've also been out of a rhythm as a beat writing team here. There's been a lot of abbreviated schedules or elongated schedules, and I think that we are kind of learning how they can handle some of that adversity, whether it's high stakes games on prime time or if it's just playing on a Thursday night, playing on a Monday night, long weeks, short weeks, bye weeks. They've kind of dealt with a lot of that over the last 6 weeks.
Speaking of these weird schedules, the Packers are actually coming off their own extended rest. They played in last Thursday week slot, that night game. And here they are coming off extended rest. And EJ for the Packers under center is back-to-back reigning MVP Aaron Rodgers. EJ, though, this Packers offense hasn't looked quite like the team that has dominated the NFC North and really competed for the NFC's top spot for a majority or for the better part of the past 2 decades. What has gone wrong here for Green Bay as they meet, again, the Eagles, who are 9-1 tonight?
Yeah, I think this is an offense that struggled to find a suitable replacement for Devonte Adams. Devonte Adams is one of the best one of the best receivers in the NFL for a reason, and I think that this Packers offense misses him for sure. I think that that's a big part of it is they've got a lot of young receivers, and the passing game hasn't been where it once was. They've been pretty good as a rushing team, and I think that that's kind of where they found success in the last month or so. Is kind of leaning on the run game, which is kind of weird to say when you have Aaron Rodgers. To say that a team wants to pound the rock or really run the ball a lot, but they've definitely been a little bit more successful doing that. And this is just kind of one of those weird cases. This is why they don't play the games on paper. Going into the year, we definitely thought Green Bay was going to be a contender, and as it sits right now, they're kind of just trying to stay alive in the playoff hunt. Which is why this game will be interesting. I think Green Bay's got a lot on the line. The Eagles maybe a little bit less. So I think that this has been the kind of the result of some injuries, but also just not really being able to sustain a passing game the way that they would have, the way they have in years past with Devontae Adams, not Devontae Smith.
The two Devontaes right there, both playing receiver, but Devontae Adams obviously now in Las Vegas. EJ dissected a bit of the Packers' struggles on offense. EJ, I want to tee up one of your stories from earlier in the week. There's a lot of familiarity between the Eagles and Aaron Rodgers. Jonathan Gannon coached there in Minnesota for several seasons. And not just that, EJ, over the past couple weeks, this Eagles team has added some veteran faces who are very familiar with Aaron Rodgers. Who should we look out for tonight amongst the Eagles' defensive front?
Yeah, so Robert Quinn, Linval Joseph, and Ndamukong Suh all have played 10-plus games against the Packers in their career. Ndamukong Suh had all those years. He started his career with the Detroit Lions. Linval Joseph played with the Minnesota Vikings for a while, and Robert Quinn obviously had a long stint with the Bears. So Robert Quinn's got 7.5 sacks against Aaron Rodgers. I talked to him about it earlier this week. He actually guessed that he had 7, so that's pretty good. And it's actually, I asked him, which one do you remember the most? And he told me, well, the only sack I have this season was on Aaron Rodgers. So, and he said, I don't really know what to make of that. Maybe it's a sign of a slow start, or maybe this is just a sign that this is the week where I'm going to get back on track. So, there's definitely a lot of familiarity, and Ndamukong Suh said that he hates the Packers with all his heart. That old rivalry doesn't just go away now that he's playing outside of the NFC North. And I think Linval Joseph is going to have a huge role tonight. And maybe his familiarity with the other Aaron Jones, not Aaron Rodgers, is what'll be most important for the Eagles defense tonight, because I do think they're going to need him to have a really good game if they're going to contain this rushing attack.
Yeah, certainly. You mentioned the talent of Aaron Rodgers, who's actually dealing with a broken bone in his thumb, in his hand, in his throwing hand. They have not been passing the ball at the clip that we're known to see. Again, we will see how this defensive front, who has a lot of familiarity with Green Bay, contains Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers tonight in Philadelphia. EJ, let's transition over to who's hurt and who's healthy. If you're an Eagles fan, you might have been sweating after Thanksgiving because A.J. Brown, the team's top receiver, their star wideout who they acquired in the offseason, he's just been everything as advertised for this offense. He was sick in bed all day Thanksgiving, EJ. He did not practice. He told us on Friday afternoon after practice when he did participate after taking that one day off. He basically said he felt like crap on a scale of 1 to 10. He felt about a 3. EJ, you just snapped a photo of him down here on the field. He is out here. He's going through his warm ups. Do you expect the illness here to affect AJ? And if it's still kind of lingering, I mean, he said he was a 3 on Friday. What will this offense rely on tonight?
Yeah, I mean they need him because Dallas Goddard is out, and they didn't do a necessarily great job kind of insulating that loss with Dallas Goddard last week. I mean, when you talk to the coaching staff about it, there's a lot of talk about AJ gets more targets, Devontae gets more targets. Zach Pascal and Quez might get more targets. So I think that I'm not really sure. I mean, it's hard to tell. We won't know probably until the first or second series how much the illness is affecting AJ. I saw him out here jogging around the field and kind of going through warmups. Didn't seem to be all that inhibited or anything like that. But yeah, I think you could definitely tell on Friday when we were we were around the facility that he was impacted by it at least that day. It seemed a little bit to be struggling with it. So I mean, I'm sure that he's probably rested up since then. And again, I think it's going to be one of those things where you'll probably be able to tell pretty early on whether or not he's even close to 100%.
And we should note, EJ, over the past couple days, again, he said he was felt about a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10 on Friday. He said that he had planned to, stay in bed over these past couple days, all day today, yesterday, and also take some IVs. Get that hydration up here, as they have those lulling effects, waiting all around for this night game. Again, they are the primetime game tonight on national TV. We will see how A.J. Brown is still affected by the illness, the stomach bug that he had earlier in the week. EJ also noting that everyone else on the active roster did not have a designation, which is good news, although this team is still without Jordan Davis, the top rookie defensive tackle, tight end Dallas Goddard, who you mentioned, and also slot corner Avante Maddox of that group. Jordan Davis is eligible to return the soonest. Next week, we will see if he takes the practice field this week with the Titans coming to town.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously Linval Joseph kind of fills that role. And I thought he played really well against the Colts. I thought he was a big part of why they kind of steadied against the run. But once they get Jordan Davis back, I mean, that'll be a big boost to the run defense. I'm curious to see what happens with Linval Joseph once Jordan Davis is back. I mean, I feel like they could rotate those two guys, but yeah, they definitely kind of play that same exact role. So it'll be interesting to see. And I mean, yeah, that's one of my biggest questions going. The Dallas Goddard thing is one of my biggest questions going into tonight. Is Jack Stoll had one catch for 7 yards. He was the only tight end to have a catch. The group, whether it was Jack Stoll, Grant Calcaterra, or Tyree Jackson, they each had a costly penalty. Jack Stoll's on special teams, but still, I think the Eagles kind of struggled to insulate that loss, like I mentioned earlier. And I think that what Goddard does, not just as a receiving tight end, but also as a blocking tight end, and just giving the Eagles coaching staff an ability to be multifaceted, be unpredictable out of different formations. I mean, that's stuff that is going to be really important down the stretch against really good teams, and I think that's going to continue to be a test over the next few weeks to see if maybe can we put Zach Pascal in the slot and kind of get a tough blocker on the field who also is a threat in the passing game, or can Grant Calcaterra kind of unlock something as a blocker? They have to figure out something so they're a little less predictable, because right now I do think that they kind of telegraph what they're doing a little bit just by the personnel they have on the field. That's something that most teams deal with. Like Dallas Goddard is a luxury. The way that he can play both in the run and the pass game from different alignments, that's not something most teams have. So there are certainly ways to take care of that, but I do think the Eagles are kind of struggling to figure that out right now.
We'll see exactly how the offense continues to adjust without Dallas Goddard, who remains on IR with a shoulder injury. Again, eligible to come back in a couple weeks. Jordan Davis of that group of 3 with Goddard, Maddox, and Jordan Davis, he is eligible to return next week. We'll see if he hits the practice field after this Packers game. EJ, let's transition over to what you said. Submit your comments and questions at inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. Next week, we'll have a chance to read your comments during our show. EJ, our first comment comes from Seabass70, who says, assuming Jalen Hurts signs an extension at some point, The Birds need to draft well and have cheaper, younger players, kind of what they didn't do for Carson Wentz. EJ, a bit of a loaded comment here, but you and I were having a conversation last week in Indianapolis with our columnist and colleague Mike Sealski. This roster, I think it's going to look quite different next year. Our other colleague Jeff McClain wrote a story on a really in-depth story on the possibilities of Jalen Hurts' future with this team and extension possibilities. You can check that out at Inquirer.com. But I'm expecting quite a bit of roster turnover here heading into next year with expiring deals, a lot of rental type players. EJ, what do you expect the Eagles here to do with Jalen Hurts? I know with a competitive team at 9-1, it's hard to think about the draft, but again, a reminder: the Eagles do have 2 first-round picks heading into next year.
Yeah, and that Saints pick is looking better and better each week. I think the Saints are losing right now, actually. So, yeah, no, I think that that's important. That's the formula. Once you have a quarterback on a big contract, it's really important to have cheap deal. Talent, cheap talent. First round picks, guys contributing on rookie contracts is huge. So, as you mentioned, they've got some very major contributors who are on one year deals. Javon Hargrave, Chauncey Gardner Johnson, James Bradbury, Kaiser White, and TJ Edwards, Isaac Seumalo. I mean, those are just the ones I can name off the top of my head. That's 6 key starters that are all on 1 year deals. Now they've got some guys who are maybe waiting in the wings, some rookies, whether you think it's like Nakobe Dean or Cam Jurgens if Jason Kelsey were to retire. They've got guys who can kind of step in or maybe are willing or ready for a new role or a bigger role, but they definitely have some question marks at big spots after this season. And if you're paying Jalen Hurts 45-50 million dollars a year, all of a sudden you got to figure out how to fill those spots through the draft, through cheap contracts, through creative measures. And that's kind of the next step. When you're building around a rookie quarterback, you have to maximize the talent around them. You have to maximize that window. And then once they're on that big contract, that we expect Jalen Hurts to probably sign at the end of this offseason or maybe sometime next year, now it shifts. It's going to have to be, finding cheaper talent, maybe making tough decisions. You see it with every team. I mean, you see it with the Kansas City Chiefs trading away Tyreek Hill. I mean, no team wants to trade Tyreek Hill, but some teams can't afford to pay him. And when you have a quarterback making $50 million a year, it's really hard to figure out the math around that. So, the Eagles are one of the most creative teams when it comes to salary cap. And they're one of the more aggressive teams when it comes to trading around in the draft. I do think that they're going to have to use the 2 first rounders they have this year, whether it's to trade back or whether it's to trade up to get a really talented player. I think we'll see them try a lot of creative ways to kind of address what will become the new challenge is when Jalen Hurts is making a little bit more money, just a little bit more money.
Jalen Hurts continues to drive his price up. He's eligible for an extension this upcoming offseason. We will see exactly the roster turnover. The Eagles are competing to play in February, but again, a lot to think about. Jalen Hurts and also 2 first-round picks. EJ, another draft-related comment comes from DDR, who said, "I expect Howie to trade one of the first-rounders for multiple late-round picks. Going to need to get quality defensive players with the high picks." EJ, I'm not necessarily sold on Howie selling one of those picks. I think we've got to see how this plays out. It should be noted they do not have a lot of picks heading into the next year. I believe 4 or 5. But again, those 2 first rounders. I do agree here with DDR that they're going to have to address the defense just based off that list that you just mentioned. Impact players they have coming from that defensive side.
Yeah, I feel like the Eagles have a track record of valuing pass rush, and I think that if you look at the teams that are consistently in the playoff picture and winning meaningful games, a lot of them have 1 or 2 superstars, especially on the edge. Obviously, the Eagles have done it with the interior before with guys like Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave last year. But I do think that if the Saints pick is as good as it's looking, I could definitely see them addressing edge early. Whether it's the guy from Will Anderson from Alabama or Miles Murphy from Clemson, there's a lot of guys at the top of the draft that will be really good off the edge, and I think that that's a position that they should and would covet. Trying to get just like total freak athlete off the edge. As far as trading back, I mean, if they're picking in the 30s, 30, 31, 32, or maybe even like late 20s, I could see them trading out, early second round. Given a team that maybe wants to go up and get a quarterback and get that 5th-year option, maybe getting something back from a team like that. All of a sudden you're picking 36 and you pick up an extra third rounder. That's the type of stuff they're going to have to do. They're going to have to be creative, and they're going to have to be, aggressive and trying to find just ways to add more guys on rookie contracts. If we're looking at this team and they've got 4 or 5 starters, whether it was C.J. Gardner-Johnson or James Bradbury, whether it's a linebacker, if they've got 4 or 5 starting roles available and they really need to get 3 or 4 addressed to the draft, the more day 2 picks you can get, the better.
EJ, our and final comment comes from Brendan M, who says the Packers aren't 4-7 by accident. They've earned that record by being bad most of the season. We are a family-owned company, and Rodgers is smart enough to know that they don't have a realistic path to the playoffs. A bit of a strong one here from Brendan. EJ, but in the NFL, they like to say any given Sunday, but especially with a team that has proven talent. I mean, they've got a back-to-back league MVP. We discussed why the offense has not been rolling compared to past years without Devontae Adams. But again, they've got their backs against the wall. It's almost win out here from this point on for these Green Bay Packers who are visiting town tonight.
Yeah, I don't usually put a lot of stock into urgency. Like it's the NFL. Every team wants to win desperately every week, but I do sometimes put a little bit of stock into stuff like what we're going into right now, which is like the Packers have to basically win out to stay in this playoff picture. They've been playing better recently, and I think that once you get to that point where it's like, all right, well, if we lose another game, we're out. I do think you start pulling out all the stops. I think that you also start maybe not caring as much about, well, what is my superstar quarterback going to think if we start running the ball 40 to 50 times a game? So I do think that the Packers have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that they do have that sense of urgency. They definitely want to keep themselves in the playoff picture here. And I mean, it's a primetime game. I'm sure both teams will get up for it, but the Packers do have that little extra motivation. How much does it really matter? I guess we'll find out. But yeah, I do think that that's something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on tonight.
EJ, let's transition over to predictions. But first, let's go to some thoughts from Jeff McClain.
Hi, I'm Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer, here to talk a little bit more about the Eagles matchup against the Green Bay Packers. Heading into the season, this would have been probably marked down as a game that the Eagles could possibly lose, and maybe even mark it down as an L, considering that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback and that the Packers have been one of the better teams in the NFC over the last 2 decades. That being said, the Packers are really struggling this year. They're 4-7, and Aaron Rodgers just hasn't looked like Aaron Rodgers. A lot of it has to do with the fact that he doesn't have Devontae Adams, and really he doesn't have a receiver that he can rely on when things break down in the pocket, which has happened a fair amount for Rodgers. The Packers seem to have found someone that maybe potentially can help Rodgers, and that's been Christian Watson. The rookie struggled through the first 2 months of the season, but he has been a touchdown-making machine the last few weeks, and he will be a guy that the Eagles have to pay attention to, especially in the red zone. He's caught a lot of touchdowns, and he's fast. In terms of the run game, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, they're two of the better, they form one of the better combos at the running back position in the NFL. And the Eagles, as we know, have struggled a little bit in the run defense. They did address it last week in bringing in Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. And aside from that first drive against the Packers, they pretty much got the job done in really containing that ground attack. And I don't seem to think that it's going to happen again in terms of that first drive, because I think Jonathan Gannon has found a formula that can work. That being said, Gannon will play his scheme the way he's played it all year. He's going to play a little bit of soft coverages, quarters, cover two. He's going to allow Rodgers to take those short passes, hoping that they'll make mistakes over the course of a long drive. Rodgers, though, will take those short check down throws if they're there, because he's so accurate. So that's where you have to wonder if Gannon's going to mix things up. And this will certainly be the best quarterback that the Eagles have faced, even though Rodgers hasn't looked like the future Hall of Famer that he will likely be. On the other side of the ball, the Eagles offense is coming off probably its worst performance of the season. I don't think that had much to do with the players. Yes, there were some mistakes, but I think some of that had to do with the position that Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen had put their players in. Went surprisingly a little heavy at tight end with Dallas Goedert being out. I think that affected them in some of the execution. We saw 5 penalties on the offense in the first half. At one point, 3 penalties in a row. But you saw certain plays that were called that I think you're just kind of stressing those tight end, putting stress on those tight ends. And I think you need to see a little bit more of going to the outside, to Devontae Smith going outside to A.J. Brown. And I think you may see that this week. Jalen Hurts didn't have his best game either, especially early on, made some uncharacteristic decisions, taking a sack that pulled him out of field goal range, took a sack on 4th down when he ran out of bounds. But when it came down to it in crunch time, Hurts delivered and added more to the case that he's the MVP of this league. He may not have had his best day throwing, but on the ground, the Eagles just placed a lot on his shoulders, and he was able to deliver and obviously scored the game-winning touchdown. So Hurts, not as concerned about him. And, the Packers defense hasn't really been that great and consistent this year. And I think there's opportunities for the Eagles to attack them down the field against those 2 safeties that they have there. So I'm going to lean in the Eagles' direction this one. They're 9-1. Every time they win, I feel like, the following week they should be the favorite, which is what they are again this week. You certainly think they're in a little bit of a dry spell these last 3 weeks, the way they've played. But I'm going to go with them over a Packers team that just quite isn't what it has been of late. I'm going to pick it at Eagles 30, Packers 23, and the Eagles move to 10-1. That's it from me. Back to you guys at Game Day Central.
EJ, as Jeff points out, the Eagles are looking for their 10th victory. They've got 9 already, totaling last year's victory total, looking for win number 10. EJ, before we get your prediction, give me a player to watch out for tonight.
Give me Devontae Smith. I feel like, A.J. Brown probably a little bit, not feeling 100%. I could see Devontae having a big game. He kind of was, propping up the Eagles offense for a little bit of for a stretch there against the Colts. Felt like, the only thing that was working was comeback routes to Devontae. So I could see him having a big role. And I mean, I'm going to still hang on to my Zach Pascal prediction from last week a little bit. I just think that, he's going to be probably the Dallas Goedert replacement, in my opinion. I just think that the toughness he brings in the slot as a run blocker, and then also the ability to kind of make plays in the pass game a little bit. Obviously, maybe not at the magnitude that Dallas Goedert does, but I do think that he's probably the one that I would look to if I had to, predict who's going to be the one that kind of fills that Dallas Goedert production void.
Eagles still looking to continue this adjustment without Dallas Goedert in the offense. EJ goes with Devontae Smith. Let me get Miles Sanders. The Eagles running back is enjoying one of the better years of his career. He's stayed healthy throughout the season. But, EJ, the Eagles running backs have not registered a touchdown, I believe, over the past 3 weeks. Gut feeling that he finds the end zone tonight against this Packers defensive front. EJ, it is prediction time. Are you sticking with what you put in today's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer? I think this is one of the first weeks where we were not all in unison with our predictions.
Yeah, I picked the Packers to win. I just think that some of like the declarations that the Eagles' run defense is fixed is kind of a little bit lacking context. I think that the Colts are one of the worst running teams in the NFL. Obviously, they had success running the ball against the Eagles on the first drive, and then the Eagles defense kind of settled in. I'm not really sold. I mean, I don't like to – I think in general people probably realize about me, I don't like to be week to week with stuff. I kind of like to see, the sample size kind of grow a little bit. And I think this will be a much better test of that. I think that, Green Bay is 5th in rushing efficiency this year by Football Outsiders. That's, a lot different than 32nd with the Colts. So I kind of expect that the Packers will be able to run the ball with a lot of success, and we saw that with Washington, that is the one way that the Eagles have lost a game this season is by just getting gashed in the run game, not being able to get off the field on third downs because they're giving up third and manageables. So I think that there is a blueprint for the Packers to win this game, because I didn't even mention Aaron Rodgers in this so far. Aaron Rodgers, maybe not what he was the last couple of years, but he's still Aaron Rodgers. So I think the Eagles defense could really struggle tonight, and I think that the offense is still kind of trying to figure out how to, function without Dallas Goedert. I think we saw it against Indianapolis. So I don't I don't necessarily think this is like a slam dunk Packers blowout. I picked a close game. I think I picked 24-21. I could see this being a close game throughout the game, but I do think that the Packers have enough of a matchup advantage that they could win this tonight.
As EJ points out, Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon, relying on that run strength for the Packers. Also, another player who has developed some chemistry with Aaron Rodgers here over the past few weeks. Christian Watson, the rookie wide receiver, has 5 touchdowns over the past 2 games. EJ, as a down of a year that the Packers are going, and I know Aaron Rodgers, again, the back-to-back MVP, just comparing, this Packers offense to years before, it just quite isn't the same. We mentioned their strengths in the run game. Linval Joseph has been here to boost that. We'll see his snaps continue to go up here with Jordan Davis out. I'm going to stick with the Eagles with Jeff. I think if I've got it about between a 7 to 10 point victory. Don't remember the exact score. EJ, before we wrap up, anything else to pay attention here tonight as the Eagles host these Green Bay Packers?
I'll be keeping an eye on Robert Quinn's snap count. He only played 10 snaps against the Colts, and I think or I think it was 7 snaps actually. He didn't play very much, and I just think that that's something that maybe it's just the way the game went, but I do think that his role is going to be something worth watching. Obviously, Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph, they have a big role on the interior defensive line, kind of stuff in the run. I want to see if Robert Quinn maybe gets more snaps or if he kind of continues to have this limited role on the edge rusher rotation.
Robert Quinn famously likes to wear those sweatpants during those games. EJ's betting that they're more off as he tries to find time on the field against a familiar opponent in Aaron Rodgers. EJ, it is time to wrap up. I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in to Inquirer live at Game Day Central, presented by NJM Insurance. They are our sponsors for tonight's Game Day Central. EJ, I wanted to also remind everyone to stick around at inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. That will be the place where they can continue the conversation with myself, with EJ, Jeff, Mike Sealski. We are all here on site ready to cover this game as the Eagles host the Packers in a primetime matchup on Sunday Night Football. Who knows, during our show next week, we'll be back here again in South Philadelphia. We'll have a chance to read those comments and questions during our show. For EJ Smith, I am Josh Tolentino. Thank you so much for tuning in to Game Day Central.